Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Today, we're diving deep into the world of job searching with the incredible Courtney Motyczka. As a seasoned career advisor with a rich background in communication, conflict resolution, professional development, and marketing, Courtney has made it her mission to empower job seekers to take control of their careers. Get ready for a conversation that's packed with game-changing insights. Courtney will reveal how to transform your resume into a powerful marketing tool, turn interviews into engaging conversations, and navigate the ever-evolving job market with unwavering confidence. Courtney's personalized, data-driven approach has helped hundreds of students and professionals land their dream jobs. And now she's here to share her wisdom with you. Whether you're actively job hunting, looking to climb the ladder in your current role, or simply curious about building a fulfilling career, this episode is a must listen. You'll walk away with actionable strategies to supercharge your job search and career development. Courtney's dedication to making career growth accessible for all is truly inspiring. I can't wait for you to hear her invaluable advice. So let's jump right in. Good morning, Courtney.
Hey, Bob. Thanks so much for having me today.
Courtney, my signature question that my listeners really enjoy hearing about, if you think back when you were a child, what was it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, Bob, I think for me, this is something that changed annually at least. At one point, I wanted to be a firefighter and then a lawyer, a WNBA, basketball player. I was a little bit all over the place. So it was quite a journey to land myself being a career coach.
Courtney, what is the biggest mistake job seekers make when starting their job search, and how can they avoid that mistake?
One of the most common mistakes that I see job seekers making when they are either career transitioning or just job searching in general is working in a silo. Whether it is that they are concerned about their employer learning that they're looking for a new job, or maybe they've been let go of a job and they aren't wanting to fully embrace and face that. Oftentimes people come to me and they don't know where to start. So they do this very individually and they forget about all of these great resources that they may have right at their fingertips around them through family or friends or just their social circles nearby. So oftentimes the first place that I start with people is just kind of a quick touch base. Who have we talked to about this and where are you on the networking spectrum? It's really important to have those extra foundations of support, right, as you're going through job search. So definitely working with a more team-oriented mindset rather than that you're doing this completely independently can really shift the trajectory of your job search.
I certainly later on want to talk a little bit more about networking. And we're going to give so many great ideas in terms of what to do in your job search But let's start out and really put the guardrails up here. What does not work as you're trying to manage your transition?
So I would say definitely doing so independently does not tend to work. Also, I think this idea that just doing one resume and submitting as many applications as possible is not usually a successful approach. I think oftentimes too, I hear a lot from job seekers that they feel stuck in their jobs. And so this kind of pushes people to this mentality of, I just want to get out. I just want to make a change. I'll take anything that comes knocking on my door. And that method oftentimes leads to a bit of a chaotic approach that doesn't really garner results. So having strategy behind your job search definitely is something that will change how you approach it and also change your results.
Courtney, how should a job seeker tailor their approach when they're transitioning to a new role and maybe even a new industry?
I highly recommend for job seekers to sit down and create a list of things that they love about their job, their current role, or their current career, and then the things that they really don't like. And have that pro-con list as a starting point to develop your goal. So then that way you have an idea of kind of what's working and what's not working. And that leads you to the next point of making sure you have a map, if you will. What is your roadmap for moving from point A to point B?
That almost sounds like you need to have a recruiting strategy.
A little bit, yes. You definitely want to have some strategy. And to that point, right, recruiters are using a strategy. So as a job seeker, you want to tap into that a little bit. Not every role is going to be a perfect fit, and that's okay. You want to remember, even in the interview stage, to interview your interviewer and know that what you need is still important. Even if you have this driving force to get out of where you are, moving from one bad situation to a situation that just feels like it might be a little bit less bad is not always the answer, right? The quickest solution isn't always the best solution. So that's where that roadmap can be really helpful, so that you're working towards a goal and you're not finding yourself doing that same process in 8 to 12 months.
You mentioned earlier about who have you told your job situation to, which is another way of defining networking. Can you give us some best practices in networking that you've seen, and especially for those who are introverted or just plain uncomfortable reaching out to people?
Yeah, absolutely. I hear a lot of people talking about their fear of networking, or that it feels overwhelming. And one of the best things that I can say with networking, especially if you are an introverted person, is to remember that your professional identity does not have to be the same as your personal identity. How we show up at work is not often the exact same way that we would show up at a family event. Now, how does this apply to networking? Well, when you're at a networking event, it's not a social gathering. Everyone is there with the same goal in mind. So if you can get comfortable with this idea of, I'm okay with the fact that I'm an introverted person in my personal life, maybe that's not something you want to change about you, and that's okay. Maybe in your professional life, though, you show up with a little bit more of a bold motivation. You can use that to leverage yourself in a networking event, especially by remembering that everyone is there with the same goal in mind. So don't set those sights too high. Maybe you start with, I'm going to send 3 LinkedIn connections per day, and I'm going to attend 1 in-person networking event this month. And that networking event, the goal can strictly be that you're attending. Oftentimes, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to see outcomes and not recognize those small wins along the way. So just attending to learn the in-person environment of networking can be a great start to get comfortable in those situations. As people grow in their careers, and they get very comfortable around their colleagues, we often forget that feeling of meeting strangers. We see this a lot now post-COVID too, right? We forgot what it's like to be in a room full of people where we don't know anyone. So getting really comfortable with what networking events in person looks like can be a great way to just kind of get your feet wet a little bit. Also, go in prepared. If you go to an in-person networking event, it's perfectly fine to have some questions prepared, even if they're very basic questions, so that if you find yourself freezing up a little bit, you have a point of reference. Same thing for those LinkedIn connections. You can start by just sending the connection request. Cold connections work. And so just sending the request, maybe interacting with some posts, engaging with that new person's content can be a great way to introduce yourself without having to send that direct message of, hey, this is why I sent the connection and this is what I need from you. It adds that little bit of personality to it.
Courtney, is it different somehow networking on LinkedIn than it is at one of those networking events that you talk about? And again, what are some of the best practices that you've seen to be effective in your networking on LinkedIn?
Networking online is certainly very different than in person. When we're networking online, we may not be considering things like professional attire, body language. Those are things that we tend to get in our heads about a little bit. Some people find it far easier to network online, right behind a screen. It's what we have grown to know. And some people find that to be incredibly more intimidating. They have no clue what this person is like that they're reaching out to. They don't have those normal social cues that you get in person. Best practices for in-person networking, I'll start there. Remember that there are social cues besides your word. When you're in a room full of people, think about what you look for and what you consider to be approachable. Typically, people that are smiling are people that are signaling to us that they are warmer or more approachable. So doing so can really help you to be approached if you're not the one that is going to want to make that first move. Even just something as simple as positioning yourself in the room to where you're facing openly to the room, not with your arms crossed, but looking like you are ready to engage in that conversation. Now, online, you don't have those things to fall back on. So considering your LinkedIn network, I think it's really critical to diversify your LinkedIn network. So there's two different approaches that I recommend. I really recommend to kind of divide up how you network on LinkedIn. You should have two very clear kinds of connection requests. So the first group are people that are in your field or in the field that you are targeting. And they're equally as important as those that are not, but for very different reasons. So the people that are in your field are likely going to be able to help you with professional development. They may have an opportunity for job shadowing, even if it's remotely. There's a lot of different things that they can contribute to your next steps. However, people outside of your field can be a great resource to finding the right people in your field. We see a lot with job seekers, this idea that I'm just going to spam recruiters and hope one of them catch an eye for my profile. But really, getting a personal connection with someone that's in a final decision-making position is what will really help you to get to that next step. And sometimes that could be someone in a totally different department that is going to connect you with that person. So diversifying your network is a great way to help you get your foot in the door in a different way with a more personal approach.
Courtney, I keep reading about, hearing about the hidden job market. Can you describe to us what that is and how do I go about finding and uncovering those unposted job opportunities?
I think that the hidden job market is, I think the idea of it can be overinflated at times. What I think of when I'm considering the hidden job market really is those small windows of opportunity. And this is, again, where diversifying your network, particularly on LinkedIn, can be really beneficial. So Oftentimes, when people are leaving a role, the first person they're going to go to is hopefully their boss. And slowly, as we know in office culture, whether it's on site or remote, word will get out. They'll start talking to colleagues about it and so on before that job posting ever goes up. So there's this great window of opportunity where if you have a diversified network of people who know what you are looking for, you may get that message that says, hey, my buddy is leaving this job and I think it's a perfect fit for what you're looking for. Can you send me a resume so I can give it to the manager that I know is going to be hiring for that role? Maybe the job posting is still going up, right? So not necessarily truly hidden, but now you've gotten a first opportunity because you put in that work in advance to really put yourself out there and let your network know that you are looking for a role and what that role is going to look like. And that has been a very effective technique for a lot of job seekers. And in fact, myself included, I've had personal experience with that. So I've had 2 roles that I've been offered just strictly from having communication within my network about this is what I'm looking for. These are some places that I want to go. That would be a good fit for me. And getting those messages from LinkedIn, hey, I know someone that's about to leave a position that sounds just like this, and getting me in contact with those recruiters. So I think that's a great way to look at it. Rather than wrecking your brain about how to crack the code of this massive hidden market that I think, like I said, can be overinflated at times. But being loud and proud about your job search when you can be is a great way to accelerate it.
I read someplace, Courtney, that on average, every open requisition that they're looking for talent has 250 to 300 resumes submitted to it. How do I find the key elements of a standout resume, and how can job seekers market themselves effectively so that they are one of those prime candidates?
I know we do see these numbers often, that these roles, especially if you're looking at more entry-level roles or roles that have a wider opportunity in terms of qualifications, you may see even more applicants than that. I know for a lot of people who see jobs on LinkedIn, they might say there's 500 applicants. I'm not submitting a resume for that. So there's 2 things I'd like to touch on with that. First of all, remember that not every resume that is submitted by someone qualified for that role. That's a very important part. We see numbers and statistics, and we see them without context. So that's important to note. However, when it comes to standing out with your resume, there's a couple things that really make a difference. First of all, making sure your resume is related to the role that you are applying to, especially for my career transitioners. I see a lot of career transitioners say, well, I have so many skills from this past job, and maybe it'll be helpful in this future position. I know it's not listed in the job description, but just maybe that'll be the one thing that piques their interest. Unfortunately, by doing that, you're creating clutter on the resume. It's making it harder for a recruiter to identify those key skills that they need from the job description. So tailor your resume. There's lots of platforms out there to help you do that. There's a lot of good ones out there to do that. So tailor your resume. That would be the first thing I would say. You don't need to have a 3-4 page resume to get a job. It should not be more than 2 pages. The second thing is, remember that content is what is selling you. Your resume is a marketing tool. Think of it as personalized marketing material. You can make your resume you without making it colorful and filled with borders and flowers and pictures and tables. We don't need all of that on a resume. You really want to have a straightforward resume that fits the resume formatting standard, which I know there's a lot of different resume formatting advice out there, but something really straightforward. Your target job title, 2 to 3 sentence summary, your skills, and then your professional experience followed by education and certifications. That's a great place to start. But your job descriptions are really important. You want your job descriptions to talk about how you did your job, how you personally executed, not the responsibilities that are listed on a job description or a job ad. And so talking about how you did that job is critical. Numbers are very important. And you can think of everybody in there, all different kinds of roles, can think of the accomplishments that they had in that position. Doesn't have to be an accomplishment that you won an award for. Oftentimes people think way too big. I didn't save this company $1 million. That's okay. You don't have to for it to be an accomplishment. You want to talk about how you did that job and what made you do that job well. What is unique to you? And that is how you will stand out from your resume.
Courtney, what are the soft skills that you should have that can be of most value to support your career transition?
I'm going to say, Bob, in all of my years of doing this, one of the most underrated soft skills is communication. People oftentimes forget about how critical communication is in the job search stage, in the interview stage, and even once you're hired. Professional communication is really critical. Sometimes people only get to know us through our written words, whether it's over instant messenger platforms like Slack or Teams. Maybe it's email. Maybe it's from that LinkedIn message that you sent 6 months ago, letting someone know you're looking for a job. But don't underestimate how critical the communication piece is. This is often where people struggle so much with resumes. We're really not given a blueprint on how to write resumes. And so it becomes very overwhelming. You write resumes in statements and not sentences. And we spend all this time in our primary school years learning how to structure a sentence. And then you get to adulthood and we say, okay, we're not going to do that on a resume. And it's new, it's different. So it becomes challenging. But understanding how to communicate with others is so critical, not just in job search, but in professional development as a whole. So don't underestimate what you can do with your own knowledge and words. Speak up. I saw recently a tip that said the best interview tip is to ask for the job in your interview. Tell the interviewer, I want this job. Be open about how much you want the job, because people are drawn to that desire, that goal. So being very vocal about it. Also, we talked about earlier professional identity versus personal identity. And I want to be clear that those two things do not have to look like two totally different people showing up. Your values, your morals, your ethics, that's your foundation for who you are. But they can show up differently in different spaces. Same thing is true when we talk about showing up genuinely to an interview. You do not need to Google your interview answers. What you need to do is think about what you did at your job, how you've done your job well, what has made you stellar in your career. Even if you are new to your career and you've only been in it for a year, what have you done tremendously in that past year? And how can you communicate that to an interviewer? But showing up genuinely is critical because people can sense, we can feel, right? We have natural instincts and intuition. We know when someone is not showing up as themselves. And if someone is interviewing people and you're the 200th interview that they've ever conducted, they will be able to tell if you are not showing up as yourself. We underestimate what that looks like and what that can do for us in an interview. So be confident, develop those answers, practice those answers, and show up as 100% you.
Courtney, what's your advice for answering those tough interview questions like, tell me about yourself, or what's your biggest weakness?
Definitely take a pause when you get to those tougher questions. The tell me about yourself question is often one that I am the most asked about. And I always turn it back. My job is to coach. So I often turn this back. Why is this the most difficult question? You have to talk about you. Who knows you better than you? The answer should be nobody. So when you get that question, you should be prepared. That should be something that you should practice repeatedly. You should have a couple of sentences that you have down in your mind about who you are and what you do in your workplace. That's critical. You never know when you're going to meet somebody and need to deliver that message. And that aligns really well with everything we've been talking about so far. So practice those. But if you find yourself to be especially anxious talking about yourself, take a pause. It's okay to pause in an interview. Oftentimes it will feel like it's 3 minutes and it's really only 3 seconds. And my non-traditional advice about this is to implement some meditation in your day-to-day life. You can do 1 minute of meditation a day, and it will change how you manage silence and discomfort. And I really encourage job seekers to practice that, even if it's a guided meditation, because it will help you to get comfortable with quietly breathing, bringing down your heart rate a little bit in those stressful situations, taking that moment to collect yourself. So that's really critical, is to just go into it confidently. And there is some aspect of faking it till you make it. There is sometimes where you're going to feel anxious and you have to talk yourself out of that anxiety a little bit, or you may feel ill-prepared, but you know that you spent hours prepping for that interview. You might have to trick your brain a little bit, and that's okay. I think one of the biggest lies that we have been taught as humans is that we can't control our minds. We definitely can. And I see that with job seekers all the time. That's one of the greatest points of progress that I see with job seekers when they come to me and they say, I'm so anxious about this, this, and this. When we talk about why, it really comes down to it's just that's what they think they should feel. They're not really that anxious about interviewing. It's just what we associate with interviewing. So that practice, that intentional effort will make a huge difference.
Courtney, let's talk just a bit here about a section of candidates that may be looking for jobs. And let's talk about college age children. How can parents help support their college age kids facing the decisions that they have to make about their careers?
This is a tough one. I think so often when we see people get to the end of their career, they say, okay, I'm career transitioning. And I say, why? There's this pressure that we put on young students to make this really definitive decision. And I really encourage parents, and I hear it a lot from parents. My son, my daughter is going to college. They have no direction. They're not sure what they want to do. Of course not. The possibilities are endless. And many young adults, maybe 18 through even possibly 22 and older, have had very limited experience in different work environments. We expect them to make this huge decision. We carry that burden all the way through adulthood. We carry this idea that we have to stay put in this career path that we chose. We saw a huge wave of adults change their minds and make a shift in the past few years. But I encourage people to break that narrative early on. Pick a career path and see if it's right for you. Encourage job shadowing. Utilize those networking skills. Start those networking skills early so that people are comfortable with it when they get to 30 or 35 and they want to make those changes. Implement that from the start. That way they have options and they're not feeling like they're making this dooming decision for the rest of their life. Now, if you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, right, and it's a more long-term educational program, yeah, it's a heavier decision. It's a more costly decision, absolutely. But there's things that we can do like job shadowing, talking to people who are in those career paths to help narrow down if that's really a good fit for somebody. Encourage your teenagers and your young adult children to start taking those steps now. It's a great way to develop those communication skills. It's a great way to get comfortable with networking. Most importantly, it's going to build their confidence so that when it's time for them to make that final decision, they know it's okay if I only do this for 10 years. I have the ability to change it later if I decide it's not for me.
Courtney, do you recommend any books or other resources for people who are in their own job transition?
I don't have specific books or resources that I recommend. I think it's a really personal space, so it's hard to do a blanket recommendation. But what I do recommend is to explore resources that are fitting for your unique circumstances. So taking that moment to reflect, what are some of the areas that I'm struggling with? And do your research. We have ChatGPT now and Google, of course, our favorite free friend. Utilize those things to identify some different resources that are available. There's great podcasts out there like Bob's. There's a bunch of different ways that you can develop some resources that could be a good fit for you. But I do encourage everybody to pick one very positive and uplifting resource or even hobby to implement during their job search. Oftentimes people throw themselves at job search and they burn out so quickly. You need to have something that is going to keep your spirits high as you're going through it and remind you that you're capable of doing things and doing things well. So pick a hobby that you like, that you feel like you're really good at. Pick a positive resource that can help keep you uplifted throughout your job search, and make sure you stick with the same level of dedication that you do in job search.
Courtney, we've gone through so much great information here this morning. If our listeners only remember 3 things and they implement them in the next few weeks to help them find that next great job easier and faster, what are those 3 things you want them to remember?
First and foremost, push that self-doubt right to the side. Stay confident. Know that you can do it. The best way to get other people on board with believing in you is believing in yourself. It sounds a little cliche, but it's true. And it's the first area that you have to focus on when you're doing anything, is to know you're going to get that job, right? That's what I would first say. Second of all, be genuine and true to you. Do not take any job that just comes knocking at your door. Be intentional with your job search and look for something that you know is a fit for you. Okay, so stay diligent. Stay diligent and true to yourself along the way. And third of all, the communication. I can't undersell how important it is to communicate. It impacts all these different areas of job search, but really fine-tuning your communication skills so that you can get out there and network comfortably is critical to making these shifts in our careers.
Courtney, I know for our listeners that you are an outstanding communicator in sharing so many great ideas, tips, techniques, and ways to be effective in your job search. I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate your sharing.
Absolutely, Bob. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.